People misunderstand money from the very start. They believe wealth is a scoreboard, that life becomes easy once the number on the corner of the screen hits a certain value. 1,000,000, 5, 10, whatever looks impressive at dinner parties. But money was never designed to give you peace. It was designed to test your behavior. The higher the number climbs, the louder the test becomes. I've seen men reach fortunes most dream about, and yet inside they were bankrupt or calmed. They could buy everything, but still couldn't buy silence in their own heads. That's not wealth, that's decoration. The truth is simple but uncomfortable. If your calendar, your emotions, and your obligations are controlled by money, you don't own wealth. It owns you. And ownership is a quiet difference between a rich man and a free one. People ask me, Charlie, what's the magic number to feel safe? I tell them there isn't one. Comfort doesn't come from accumulation, it comes from subtraction, from removing stupidity, noise, and unnecessary desires until you can hear your own thoughts again. You can live poor and still sleep peacefully if you avoid stupidity. You can live rich and still feel trapped if you chase status. The middle class buys luxury and calls it security. The wealthy buy complexity and call it freedom. Both end up prisoners of their own reflection. The first rule of finance is not addition, it's elimination. Eliminate the foolish behavior that keeps you broke, and you'll be astonished how quickly fortune takes care of itself. I've watched people sabotage their own peace for decades. They buy things they don't need, with money they don't truly have, to impress people they don't actually like. That's not ambition. That's anxiety disguised as achievement. In my youth, I saw it over and over: fast money, faster destruction. The culprit was never bad luck. It was boredom. People can't stand still long enough to let compounding work its quiet magic, so they chase excitement, and excitement is the most expensive hobby on earth. Let me save you a decade of mistakes. You only need to get rich once. The second time means you were careless. Most people never reach true independence because they confuse it with irresponsibility. They say they want freedom, but what they really want is escape from discipline, from accountability, from patience. Real independence is not about doing nothing. It's about having the strength to do less nonsense. It's living below your means without feeling deprived. That's the foundation of every durable fortune. The rest is just set dressing. Now, I'm not preaching against wealth. I've spent a lifetime helping to create it. But I've also spent that lifetime learning what it's for. Wealth, at its highest use, is time. Time to think, to choose, to say no. Rich is a number. Wealthy is a mindset. Rich buys distraction. Wealthy buys focus. The real measure of success is waking up when you want, working with people you respect, and refusing nonsense without fear of consequence. If you can do those three things, congratulations, you've already won. Even if your net worth isn't impressive on paper. Yet people rarely believe that. They think freedom must be expensive, that peace of mind must be purchased in bulk. They postpone joy, always promising themselves rest at the next milestone, the next promotion, the next gesture on the screen. Then they die mid-sprint. I've seen executives, doctors, lawyers, investors, brilliant individuals spend 40 years climbing the ladder only to realize at the end it was leaning against the wrong wall. Money doesn't fix misalignment. It just buys a better view from the wrong ladder. Real wealth begins when the external scoreboard stops mattering. When you no longer need applause to feel valuable or headlines to feel intelligent. Markets don't reward vanity. The world doesn't grade you on appearance. Your worth is measured by your behavior, your ability to remain rational while everyone else chases noise. You can live well with modest means if you have discipline, and you can live poorly with abundance if you have envy. That's the paradox of prosperity. The richer you get in assets, the poorer you can become in peace. People trade their youth for money, then trade that money trying to buy back youth. They could have skipped the entire circle by learning what enough means early on. Enough doesn't trend. Enough doesn't sparkle. Enough simply says, I'm fine. But modern culture despises that word because it can't be monetized. So people ignore it and pay for that ignorance with their sanity. True success isn't the endless expansion of appetite. It's the quiet contentment of restraint. When Warren and I built Berkshire, we didn't need to own 20 houses or a fleet of yachts. We needed clarity. We needed the freedom to keep playing the game without losing ourselves in it. The main, contrary to popular belief, isn't about getting rich. It's about staying rational long enough for compounding to reward you. You can't stay rational if you're always craving more. The brain that craves endlessly is the same brain that panics easily. The antidote to greed isn't poverty, it's perspective. So, start with a simple question. How much stupidity can I remove today? Because real wealth begins in subtraction, not addition. Subtract envy, subtract hurry, subtract the illusion that more is always better. Once you stop fighting arithmetic, the math of freedom reveals itself. The numbers have been waiting patiently for you to stop being emotional long enough to notice them. Most people don't have a money problem. They have a behavior problem. Give the average person $50,000 and they'll buy comfort. Give them $500,000 and they'll buy complication. Give them $5 million and they'll buy stupidity. The more they earn, the more chaos they can afford. That's the tragedy of modern prosperity. Wealth doesn't create intelligence. It amplifies whatever was already there. A fool with capital just becomes a louder fool. I've watched this cycle repeat for 70 years. The middle class that once built security on savings and patience turned into a generation financing vanity. They call it rewarding themselves. I call it slow motion self-destruction. Credit cards replaced discipline. Marketing replaced thought. Television told them what success looked like, and they bought the picture one installment at a time. You can't compound wealth if you're busy compounding payments. It's that simple. People love to say they're working for freedom. But look closer. Most are just upgrading their own cages. The car gets faster, the house gets bigger, the vacations get fancier, and the anxiety grows in proportion. Every new purchase becomes another promise to maintain, another quiet burden you can't see but always feel. They don't own luxury, luxury owns them. And once that happens, the treadmill never stops. You're not building wealth, you're financing appearance. Freedom doesn't mean buying anything you want, it means not needing to. The ability to walk away is the highest dividend money ever pays. But few ever reach that level of calm because they confuse activity with progress. They think being busy equals being productive. It doesn't. It just means you haven't learned to sit still. Wealth comes to those who can wait longer than others can stay restless. Discipline is the foundation of every fortune that lasts. Not timing, not talent, not luck, just boring, consistent restraint. That's why you don't see it celebrated. Restraint doesn't trend. It doesn't make headlines. People want secrets and shortcuts. They want to believe the right app or guru will turn their chaos into compounding. The truth is quieter. Save early, avoid debt, let time do the heavy lifting. The system works if you stop interrupting it. Each generation thinks it's too smart to repeat the mistakes of the last. Then they rename the same stupidity with a fresh buzzword and call it innovation. In the 1990s, it was .com. In 2008, it was real estate. In 2021, it was crypto. Always the same dance. Greed, denial, collapse, regret. History doesn't repeat perfectly. It rhymes in arrogance. The faces change. The math doesn't. The market will always find a way to punish impatience. You want to know the most dangerous addiction in finance? It's not leverage, it's comfort. Once people get a taste of it, they confuse it with success. They stop asking, how can I be efficient? And start asking, how can I keep this comfort forever? That's how ambition dies, quietly dressed in cashmere. The ability to downgrade gracefully is rarer than genius. Pride ruins more fortunes than bad investments ever did. I've met brilliant men who made millions and then lost it all because they couldn't shrink their lifestyle when the numbers stopped adding up. They knew the math, but the ego refused to listen. The ego whispered, "You've earned this." That's how you go broke with style, too proud to live rationally. Remember this, it's easier to stay rich than to become rich again. Once you need the world to look at you a certain way, you're not free. You're a prisoner of perception. The society rewards display, not discipline. Your neighbor doesn't know your portfolio. He knows your car, your shoes, and your vacation photos. So you play along, you buy the illusion of success until it's buying you. People rarely learn that wealth isn't about what you earn. It's about what survives taxes, inflation, and stupidity. I call them the three silent killers. Inflation eats quietly, taxes bite loudly, and stupidity finishes the job. You can't control the first too much, but the third one, that's entirely in your hands. Financial literacy is overrated. Financial humility saves more fortunes. Admitting what you don't know will protect you better than any spreadsheet or seminar ever will. You don't have to predict the next big thing. You just have to avoid the next dumb one. Every year, the world invents a new trap wrapped in buzzwords. AI, crypto, green tech, NFTs, something shiny. Greed puts a costume on ignorance and calls it opportunity. The smartest investors I know don't chase excitement. They chase endurance. They're not looking to impress anyone. They want their money to outlive them. They understand that boredom is the hidden cost of stability. Most people can't afford boredom. They need adrenaline in their portfolios and serenity in their lives, not realizing those two can't coexist. If you crave thrills, take up skydiving. Don't do it with your retirement fund. Money doesn't create discipline. It only exposes the lack of it. If you're impulsive when you're broke, you'll be reckless when you're rich. Character doesn't scale with income. It scales with the restraint. The key isn't earning more, it's needing less. To stop worshiping income, start respecting patience. The less you depend on excitement to feel alive, the closer you get to real freedom. Compounding only works for the patient because impatience interrupts it before it ever has a chance to grow. And that's the difference between surviving and winning in this game. Not brilliance, not connections, just the quiet courage to stay still while everyone else is losing their minds. The ability to say, no, don't need more right now. That's where fortune hides, in boredom and silence and the pauses most people can't tolerate.
People always think money will fix their problems. It won't. It only changes the flavor of them. If you were careless when you had a little, you'll be reckless when you have a lot. Money doesn't reform behavior. It reveals it. You can't cure foolishness with higher income. You can only magnify it. That's why the majority of new wealth disappears faster than it's earned. It's not because the system is unfair, it's because human nature is predictable. The bigger the ego, the smaller the margin of safety.
You want to see the real danger? It's not losing money. It's losing humility. The moment people start thinking they're too smart to fail, the market reminds them how wrong they are. I've ended 1,000 times. They think intelligence will protect them. It won't. Only discipline does that. The market doesn't care about your IQ. It rewards patience and punishes excitement. The same rule applies to life. The quieter you become, the better you hear what matters. Most people overcomplicate money. They turn it into philosophy, emotion, even religion. But at its core, money is just arithmetic, addition, subtraction, and restraint. You don't need a PhD to understand that. You just need to stop lying to yourself. You can't spend your way to freedom, and you can't gamble your way to security. Yet the world tries both, every day, hoping for a shortcut that doesn't exist. Let me tell you something. Financial freedom isn't mystical. It's math. $500,000, handled properly, can buy peace for life. Not luxury, but peace. The kind of peace where your mornings are quiet, your evenings are unhurried, and your thoughts belong to you. Most people can't imagine that because they've built lives that require constant adrenaline to sustain. They think comfort means constant novelty, but comfort, real comfort, is stability, the ability to stop worrying about every market tick or lifestyle upgrade. Take that same $500,000, put it into conservative investments, government bonds, high-quality stocks, safe income vehicles. Let it grow at 5% a year. That's $25,000 in interts. 9% gives you $45,000. You don't need a miracle. You need arithmetic and patience. People hear that number and scoff. They say, 45,000, that's not enough. That's because they've built lifestyles that require more drama than sense. If your happiness depends on constant spending, you've built a cage and called it comfort.
In most of the world, $45,000 a year is enough to live peacefully if you own your home, avoid debt, and don't try to impress strangers. It's not glamorous. It's not something you brag about, but it's sane. Sanity doesn't get enough credit in finance. The world celebrates boldness, but forgets that survival pays better. Boring works. Boring compounds. Boring builds empires quietly, while everyone else tweets about the next big thing.
The best investment strategy is the one you can live with while half the world loses its mind. The same applies to your lifestyle. You don't need excitement to feel alive. You need stability to stay sane. The real game isn't about speed. It's about endurance. I've always said Warren and I didn't stay wealthy because we were smarter. We stayed wealthy because we were content. We didn't need to prove anything. We didn't chase every opportunity. That's why compounding had time to work its magic. The irony is, most people think freedom comes when income exceeds expenses. It doesn't. It comes when ego stops exceeding logic. That's when the anxiety ends. You can't buy peace of mind with higher yield. You buy it by lowering your dependence on yield. Look at how fragile most people's lives are. One bad quarter, one unexpected bill, and the whole structure collapses. That's not freedom. That's leverage wearing nice clothes. Freedom means this. Your life continues quietly, predictably, even if the market closes for 5 years. You sleep the same whether interest rates rise or fall. You don't check your net worth every morning because your self-worth isn't tied to it. That's real independence, the kind that doesn't shout about itself. Here's the technical truth. If you can grow your capital just a few percent above inflation, you've already won. Compounding is a slow miracle, but it only works for the patient. The impatient treat like gambling, constantly interrupting it whenever boredom creeps in. Warren once said, it's not about being smarter, it's about being rational for longer. He was right. We got rich by sitting still, not by jumping off cliffs. People who think they're too clever for steady returns always end up being reminded that the market doesn't reward cleverness, it rewards consistency. If you think you're too rich to care about small percentages, inflation will humble you. If you think you're too smart to follow simple arithmetic, volatility will teach you humility. Wealth without discipline decays. Fufume without restraint collapses. People underestimate what modest capital can do when paired with consistency. $500,000 invested wisely beats 10 million managed emotionally. Behavior outruns math every single time. Well, think about it. A disciplined investor can live off interest indefinitely, preserving principal and letting compounding work quietly in the background. But a reckless spender can destroy a fortune faster than compounding can repair it. Making money isn't the hard part. Keeping it while your ego whispers more is. The hardest skill in finance isn't analysis, it's self-control. I once told a young investor, you don't need more money, you need fewer stupid expenses.
He laughed until his lifestyle started eating his profits.
It always happens that way. People think wealth will make them happy, but wealth just scales their habits. If your habits are poor, your wealth will just multiply the chaos. So before chasing the next opportunity, ask yourself a simpler question. Can you sit still? Can you do nothing when doing nothing is the right move? Because most people can't. They mistake movement for progress. They think if they're not constantly acting, they're falling behind. But money rewards patience, not activity. Every unnecessary move creates friction, and friction slowly erodes fortune. The calm investor is not the one with the most ideas. It's the one who resists most of them. Discipline is just sustained rationality. It's not glamorous, it's not exciting. It's simply refusing to self-destruct when temptation appears. And the longer you can hold that line, the richer, not just financially, but mentally you'll become. The hardest part of building wealth isn't earning, it's enduring. Making money demands effort. Keeping it demands character. You can study all the charts and ratios you like, but if you can't stay rational when the crowd loses its mind, you'll end up broke with excellent data. Survival, quiet, unexciting survival is a prerequisite for every success story that lasts. You can't compound what you've already destroyed. Here's the truth. Few people like to hear it. Wealth is less about brilliance and more about stamina. Anyone can be disciplined for a quarter. Very few can stay disciplined for a decade. People love the idea of consistency until it starts to feel like boredom. Then they break the one rule that matters most. Don't interrupt compounding unnecessarily. Every time impatience wins, time resets the scoreboard to zero. The world calls it volatility. I call it self-inflicted amnesia. I've watched generations of investors repeat the same ritual. They start rational, grow confident, then impatient, then broke. In bull markets, they mistake luck for skill. In bear markets, they mistake panic for prudence. The pendulum never stops swinging because people never stop feeling. That's why discipline is rarer than talent. It's emotional control disguised as arithmetic. If you want to test your temperament, don't look at how you act when things go well. Look at how you behave when nothing happens. Can you sit quietly through 6 months of flat returns without tinkering? Can you ignore the noise when every headline screams opportunity or disaster? Most can't. They crave movement, and movement becomes their downfall. The need to do something is the most expensive addiction in finance. Warren and I built Berkshire on inaction, on deliberate inactivity, while the rest of the world confused motion with intelligence. We waited for the obvious and ignored the exciting. Sometimes that meant sitting on cash for 4 while everyone else chased trends. The waiting made us rich. Everyone wants our results. No one wants our patience. Patience looks easy from the outside, but from the inside it feels like starvation. You have to train yourself to endure the silence between harvests. The market rewards endurance wrapped in humility. Arrogance multiplies risk quietly until it explodes. Humility multiplies opportunity quietly until it compounds. Every decade or so, the impatient hand their money to the patient. It's the oldest transfer of wealth in history. If you can simply survive the cycles, your fortune will grow without heroics. When I talk about discipline, people imagine austerity, spreadsheets, punishment. That's not what I mean. Discipline is elegance. It's mental cleanliness. It's the ability to say no 10 times more often than you say yes. It's resisting the impulse to fix what isn't broken. Sustained rationality is rarer than diamonds because it's uncomfortable. It requires sitting still while the world tempts you with noise. But that discomfort is where freedom hides. Once you realize boredom is not the enemy, you stop paying for entertainment disguised as opportunity. Look at any long-term winner in any field. The pattern is identical. A few right decisions and decades of avoided stupidity. That's it. No secret algorithm, No hidden formula, just a stubborn refusal. Self-destruct. Most people lose not because they make the wrong move, but because they make too many moves. They overreact, overtrade, overthink. Every unnecessary decision drains mental capital and financial capital simultaneously. Discipline protects both. There's a difference between thinking independently and thinking constantly. Independent thought happens rarely and matters deeply. Constant thought is just noise. You don't get paid for activity. You get paid for clarity. The investor who checks his portfolio once a year will often outperform the one who checks it every hour, because the second man spends his time reacting instead of reasoning. Patience creates distance. Distance creates perspective. Perspective creates profit. You can measure discipline in how quickly you say no. The undisciplined person says yes to everything. Opportunities, trends, distractions, and ends up drowning in commitments. The disciplined person filters life through a simple lens. Does this add stability or remove it? Every yes should strengthen the structure. Everything else is a polite no. Ego hates restraint. It wants applause, confirmation, and motion. But ego and compounding can't coexist. The moment you start playing to impress, you start losing quietly. Discipline removes ego from the equation and replaces it with arithmetic. 2 + 2 will always be 4. No matter how clever your story sounds. Numbers are honest. People aren't. Here's the paradox. The more disciplined you become, the simpler life feels. Simplicity breeds calm, and calm breeds better judgment. That's how compounding works outside of finance, too. Every rational decision furnishes the next one. Every calm day strengthens the habit of calm. Eventually, your entire life starts to compound. Your money, your time, your peace. It's not a miracle, it's math applied to behavior.
You don't need extraordinary brilliance to build wealth. You need ordinary habits practiced longer than anyone else can tolerate. It's like holding your breath underwater while the crowd thrashes. Eventually, they surface out of exhaustion. You surface out of patience, and the game quietly ends in your favor. The secret isn't doing more, it's surviving longer. In markets, as in life, endurance beats excitement every time. So remember this simple equation. Discipline equals clarity multiplied by patience minus ego. Remove ego and compounding becomes effortless. Let ego creep in, and you'll spend decades trying to recover from one arrogant mistake. The world doesn't punish intelligence, it punishes impulse. The disciplines survive because they've mastered the art of deliberate boredom. And deliberate boredom, though rarely celebrated, is the quiet engine of freedom. At some point, you start realizing that wealth isn't about money anymore, it's about time. When you're young, you trade all your hours chasing it. When you're older, you spend money trying to buy those hours back. But time doesn't negotiate. It only moves in one direction. The only way to win the game is to stop playing it like everyone else. Stop spending your days in pursuit of things that won't matter a decade from now. Money is supposed to be a servant, not a master. When people forget that, they start living upside down, earning to impress, spending to feel alive, and losing sleep to maintain an image that was never real. I've watched people ruin their peace for luxuries they stopped noticing after a week. They bought symbols of freedom and built prisons around them. That's not wealth. That's just noise disguised as achievement. True wealth is calm mornings and unhurried afternoons. It's control over your schedule and detachment from other people's opinions. It's the ability to say no without explaining yourself. That's what Warren understood better than anyone. He doesn't own yachts, he doesn't fly private jets, and yet he's freer than anyone with both. Freedom isn't measured by the things you can afford, it's measured by the things you can comfortably decline. Most people never define what enough looks like. That's why they never feel like they have it. Enough becomes a moving target, drifting farther every time they reach it. It's like chasing the Werness. You can walk forever and never touch it. The trick is to decide where your horizon ends. Write it down, fix it, protect it,
Because once you know what enough looks like, you can finally stop performing for the world and start living for yourself. When I was younger, I thought intelligence was the most valuable trait. Later, I learned that character is rare. Intelligence can make you rich, but character makes you useful. The world doesn't need more clever people. It needs more reliable ones. The difference is integrity, doing the right thing even when the market rewards the wrong one. You can't fake that for long. Eventually, time exposes every shortcut. We built our reputation one disciplined decision at a time. Not by being flawless, but by being consistent. Trust compounds faster than capital. Every time you act with integrity, your reputation earns interest. Every time you burn it, you pay a hidden tax. And once reputation breaks, compounding works in reverse. You start from zero again. That's why character, not IQ, becomes your most valuable asset as you grow older. People underestimate the moral dimension of rationality. Rationality isn't cold, it's clarity. It means removing emotion when emotion clouds truth. It means accepting reality even when it's uncomfortable. That's not cynicism, that's maturity. If you can face reality without denial, you'll always have an advantage over those who chase illusions. You can't fix what you refuse to see. The world is full of intelligent people sabotaging themselves because they can't admit what's obvious. We live in a time where everyone wants to look wise instead of being wise. They chase attention, not understanding. But attention is a drug. Understanding is nutrition. One fades quickly. The other sustains you. Wisdom doesn't tweet well. It doesn't trend. It just sits quietly, compounding in the background, waiting for the impatient to burn out. The older I got, the more I realized that most progress in life comes from subtraction, not addition. You get closer to truth by removing noise. You get closer to peace by removing excess. And you get closer to wisdom by removing ego. Every year I meet people who ask, what's the secret to success? I always tell them the same thing. Avoid stupidity. Success is just the absence of ruin. You don't have to a genius to stay out of trouble. You just have to be disciplined enough to not self-destruct. The road to wealth is mostly paved with avoided disasters. You can't control every outcome, but you can control your exposure to stupidity. Avoid envy, avoid debt, avoid arrogance. Those three destroy more fortunes than recessions ever will.
Envy is poison for the mind.
It makes you blind to your own blessings and obsessed with other people's outcomes. Every time you compare your chapter to someone else's, you rewrite your story around insecurity. Pure is gratitude. Real gratitude, not the kind you post about online. Gratitude quietly reminds you that contentment is already available if you stop running past it. Without gratitude, wealth becomes a treadmill. With gratitude, even modest success feels infinite. Debt is the opposite of freedom. It's tomorrow's anxiety borrowed to fund today's impulse. There's no happiness in that trade. Every dollar you owe is a piece of your future you already sold. You can't compound peace when your nights belong to creditors. Live below your means until your means multiply quietly. Then, even when the storms come, you'll stay dry. And arrogance is just insecurity in expensive clothes. The moment you start believing you're invincible, the world prepares a lesson. Humility doesn't mean weakness. It means awareness of limits. Humble person sees danger sooner because they're not blinded by ego. That awareness saves fortunes, marriages, reputations, everything worth keeping. The older you get, the clearer it becomes that wealth and wisdom are the same discipline expressed differently. Both require patience, restraint, and humility. The richest people I know aren't the ones with the most money. They're the ones who stop needing validation. They've replaced ambition with clarity. They've traded excitement for balance. They don't measure life in numbers, but in quiet mornings and clear consciences. You can't fake that kind of peace. You can only earn it one rational decision at a time, one unreactive day after another. Eventually, the world stops feeling like a competition and starts feeling like a classroom. Every mistake becomes tuition. Every day becomes interest on wisdom. That's compounding too, just in a different currency. So when you think about legacy, don't measure it by wealth alone. Measure it by behavior, by the calm you leave behind. The market forgets returns. People remember integrity. That's the kind of compounding that never stops working, even after you're gone.